I'll have dinner at home. The door to the classroom creaked, and the gray head of Yosef Moisevich appeared in the doorway. Merciful gods, colleague. Why are you still at work? Sunset is in 15 minutes, and you still have to go out of town. Pavel Viktorovich, my dear fellow, what an unnecessary risk. Hurry up. The aging dean, as always, looked imposing, in a wool three-piece suit, bronze skin, and a proud aquiline nose. Let me give you a ride. Get ready. A motor will be arriving for me any minute. His appearance and pressure caught me by surprise. I digested what I heard for a couple of seconds. I immersed myself in reading the book so deeply that I was suddenly torn out of its reality, as if I had developed decompression sickness, which divers suffered from when they surfaced from great depths too quickly. My voice sounded muffled and absent-minded, as if it had not kept up with me and remained partially in the water depths. Thank you for your concern, Yosef Moisevich, but it was empty. I will use public transport. I knew perfectly well that this would be a big and tiring detour for the dean. I did not want to expose this good man to unnecessary risk. The dean threw up his hands and was clearly ready to rush into an argument with a fit of carelessness uncharacteristic of me. But I smiled, confident in my choice. Everything is fine, really. I will make it to the guarded flight. The elderly Jew looked at me carefully, then at his watch, and deciding not to waste precious time, only sighed. Take care of yourself, Pavel Viktorovich. Have a safe trip. And to you, Yosef Moisevich, forgive me for making you worry. The dean left the auditorium, taking with him an atmosphere of exotic Middle Eastern sophistication. His footsteps echoed in the corridor, and I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes. It was amazing how captivated I was by reading. I lost track of time again, but this time, completely shamelessly. There really were 15 minutes left until sunset. I left the classroom, locked the door, and headed to my office. The empty corridors were slowly turning fiery crimson. A lump appeared in my throat. Anxiety was gradually growing. Entering my office, I began to sort out the closet with all sorts of junk. Old textbooks, things confiscated from students, which, as it turned out, they themselves did not need. Rubbish that should have been thrown out a long time ago. Ah, here it is. I showed the world an old military bag, which I equipped just in case I was late. I girded the officer's saber, threw the bag over my shoulder, and went down to the foyer. The resonant echo of my footsteps and specks of dust sparkling in, the rays of light breaking through the windows of the corridors kept me company. I was glad that none of the students would see my combat look. The professor's jacket did not go with the officer's saber. There was a dense metallic clang in the foyer. Maria Fyodorovna, a broad-shouldered woman slightly over 40, was putting on her charmed chainmail according to the guard's regulations. She did it deftly and quickly, not caring that the noise could disturb someone, because all sane people were already at home behind 7 silver bolts, salting the threshold. Institutes are usually inhabited by sane people. Of course, nothing threatened her inside the building, but the regulations, as they say, are written in blood. If it is written in the set of security rules, then be so kind as to follow them. Maria Fyodorovna, I nodded amiably to the gloomy guard. Allow me to use the phone. Why are you still here, Professor? The woman reached into the cabinet and took the phone and carried it to the window of the guard booth, tugging the cord every now and then so it wouldn't get caught on the furniture. Got carried away reading. I smiled sheepishly, realizing that the guard wouldn't consider this reason worthy of risking her life. She once went into the night forest to save her grandson. She couldn't, but the fact is, got carried away reading. Look at that, the woman growled and put the phone by the booth window. You have to go to Sputnik, out of town. It's only a 20-minute bus ride, Maria Fyodorovna. Don't over-dramatize it. A domestic problem. Nothing to worry about. My tongue was spinning social patterns that weren't reassuring to anyone present, and my fingers were twirling. The numbers of my home number on the dial. Pasha, is that you? The best sound in the world came from the receiver, my wife's voice. My heart skipped a beat and I immediately felt more confident. It was as if I could smell freshly brewed tea, baked goods, cutlets. Her hair, a bunch of wormwood hanging. In the hallway, the lump in my throat got bigger and I had to clear my throat to start speaking confidently and quickly. Lyalechka, my darling, forgive me. I was late. Everything is fine. I'll go to the bus stop now. Catch the bus. Pay extra. For the guarded one. I'll be home in about 40 minutes. Lyolya, like me earlier, was taken aback by my pressure. Well, if you say so. Yes, my dear, don't worry, I took my bag. Make me some tea by the time I get home, please. I'll have dinner at home, I promise. Okay, Pasha, have a nice trip. Thank you. See you soon. I hung up, determined to get home no matter what happened. But the seasoned security guard snapped my confidence like a sunflower seed. The guards canceled. How so? I was taken aback. It's been 2 months since They sent people from the security to the Slava Peruna collective farm. They've been doing their job there for 3 days. I have a brother-in-law in the security, so he's telling me, "Hurry up, Professor." I nodded nervously and, clutching the hilt of my belted saber, ran out onto the porch of the institute. In the square in front of the building, an old janitor was sweeping the pavement. The broom and dustpan had caught a few leaves, a few popsicle sticks, and a wrapper from a Vorozhaya candy. Quickly passing the steps, I called out to the old man, "Abai Nerlibekovich, what's wrong?" "It's getting dark." The janitor turned around, squinting his already narrow eyes, and smiled broadly. "I'll sweep now. I'll have to get up later in the morning. I'll be able to walk around Bekhtari longer." "And what about you?" "Got carried away. Reading." With each excuse I made, I felt more and more stupid. "Lost track of time. Hurry up." The janitor neither delayed nor condemned. "If you don't make it to the bus, you can take my utility room." "Thank you, Abai Nerlibekovich," I shouted, running past. A deserted square and completely deserted streets. The wind drove a newspaper page, surely running away from the janitor. I ran as fast as I could towards the bus station, trying to cut corners where possible. Forgetting about my academic degree and dignity, I climbed over the fences separating the courtyards of 5-story buildings from each other, ran across lifeless roads in the wrong places. Once a police car drove past me at full speed. A mustachioed officer in a metal helmet frowned and shook his finger at me, as if scolding a careless youth. But in essence, my actions are typical of such people. A stupid professor, a stupid book, a stupid mistake. A couple more turns, and I, out of breath from running and anxiety, ran out onto the square where the bus station was located. A green flag with the inscription, "Fast Departure," was fluttering over one of the stops, just in the direction of Sputnik, the town where I lived. A line of several people formed at the stop, which made me feel calmer. Selfish joy from the fact that I was not the only stupid and short-sighted one. Here, these people, for some reason, also found themselves in danger. I immediately felt ashamed of my gloating. Approaching the stop, I flushed, said hello. People answered me with sullen nods, busy with their own gloomy thoughts. I bet everyone was now thinking, will we get there or not? Will we have dinner at home, or will something have dinner with us? Of course, I would like the former. Who's the last one, comrades? A pregnant girl sitting on a bench a little further away smiled at me shyly. You'll be right behind me. An old bus pulled up to the stop, grunting and creaking. The driver and conductor were large men clad in thick, rusting armor, with gaudy welded patches, looking like clumsy robots from a movie. They walked around the car and covered the windows with iron shields with narrow loopholes. The workers reeked of sweat and machine oil from afar. No wonder, to walk around in such a uniform from morning until night. The men switched the car to high-security night mode. Everyone knew that this would be a long time and that it was very important. My comrades in misfortune and I watched the final touches of the sunset with longing. The sun disappeared behind the horizon and the rapid twilight began. I hadn't been to this station for a long time. Being usually collected and punctual, I was extremely rarely late, which is why I was not a regular on night buses. A colleague, Timofey, gave me a ride from Sputnik, and I went back by electric train. Its station was on the outskirts of the city, about 20 minutes on foot. The light was on in the grocery store nearby. This is rare, but if the owner of the store lives in the same house or not far from his place of work, he could afford it. I remembered that I promised Lelia to buy apples. She wanted to make a charlotte and compote. The bus workers were fiddling with the protective plates calmly and unhurriedly, instilling a sense of security in the passengers. There was still time. I walked towards the store. It was located nearby, behind a small park. Although how can you call a patch of land of 5 to 6 square meters a park? A few trees and a couple of benches. Crossing the green area, I noticed an unusual city dweller. A cat was sitting under an elderberry bush. A very serious gray guy followed me with yellow eyes. For some reason, I was convinced of his gender, although I had no evidence. It had been a long time since I had seen stray animals. On the night streets, they become the first victims of evil spirits. And if all stray dogs were very quickly recruited into service by the police, then cats, due to their total untamability, were left on their own. The store greeted me with coolness and a puzzled look from the seller, a short, strong Caucasian. He had already finished counting the cash register, judging by the wooden greasy abacus, and was putting on a light jacket. "It's too late for your stomach to call you, my dear. I'm closing already. I won't keep you. A kilo of apples and 100 grams of doctor's slush, please." I hesitantly held out the string bag. The Caucasian nodded, finding the set of products acceptable, took the container, and, selecting large red apples, chuckled. 100 grams of sausage, what do you need? For one tooth. I saw a cat in the park. I need to feed him. The man glanced at me quickly, but said nothing. He weighed the fruit in my string bag and added a pyramid of milk and a solid piece of sausage prudently cut into small cubes wrapped in newspaper. "At my expense, dear. My regards to the cat. Hurry home." I nodded gratefully and went outside. The cat sat in the same place watching my approach. I unfolded the newspaper with the treat and laid it out in front of him. The animal did not move. Having poured milk into the lid of a jar lying nearby, I stepped aside. The cat, having made sure that all the offerings were laid out and the annoying man had moved to a distance befitting his position, began to dine regally. If I am lucky, finding myself at home in the evening, I will probably eat less gracefully. But I am a professor. Just a second. The bus at the station honked, and I hurried to the stop. A tall conductor stood at the door punching tickets that passengers showed him. The joints of the armor creaked sadly from the precise movements of his hands. A mother with 2 school-age children, 3 collective farmers, a man in a checkered jacket and a pregnant girl for whom I was borrowing. "Where is your gun?" The collective farmer loudly addressed the conductor. "No gun. I have a fakel." A voice flowed from under the visor of his helmet like thick jelly. The man showed a piece of pipe resting in a sheath welded to the thigh plate. The pipe smoked, slightly and occasionally emitted sparks. It was an old design, from the time of the beginning of the war. It was adopted for service about 200 years ago, and they stopped producing it half a century ago. Not to say that it is completely infunctional, but now there are better weapons. A torch. People whispered and looked at each other in fear. "Where are the guns? Where's the firearm? Or the charmed one?" "All the guns were given to the security officers. They need them more." The conductor muttered, punching another handed-out ticket. "Have you heard of glory to Perun? What are you so scared about?" The driver, a guy with a dashingly curled mustache, stuck his head out of the cabin. "Let everything be fine. We've been driving back and forth for so long and we've never had any situations." "Shut up, old man, you'll crow." The conductor growled at his partner, but the driver only winked encouragingly at the schoolboys and disappeared into the cabin. The sliding panels with their reinforcement bars creaked. The cabin was under reliable protection. The symbols of protective spells were barely glowing on the bars. The passengers boarded the bus and took their seats. The conductor grunted with effort and pushed the thick cast-iron plate closed the front door of the bus. The car tilted noticeably, but the stabilizers worked and it slowly leveled out. "Let me remind you, we are going to Sputnik. There will be one stop, the final one. When we stop at the gate, this is not a stop. You cannot get off. Periodically, we will exceed the speed limit, according to Amendment 29.6.3b on night routes." The man mumbled inexpressively a memorized and hundreds of times voiced text, something about special rules for night driving on public transport, something about passengers' possible assistance in the event of a situation and so on, increasing anxiety and inducing gloomy thoughts. I settled down at the viewing slit of the armor plate. I don't know why. I've been on night flights a couple of times, but they were guarded, with armed soldiers and machine guns on the roof. I felt safe and decided to tickle my nerves, looking out the window. Most of the time, only roadside bushes in the moonlight, and at one turn I suddenly came face to face with two dead men. They were standing at a distance from the road, in relaxed poses, like men smoking after haymaking. Men, like men, only pale. But when I met the gaze of one of them, I lost sleep for a week. I was overcome by a wild, primeval horror. This creature was not a human, not even close. Something alien and categorically cruel, intelligent and hostile. Something that put on a red, rotting suit. Something that uses dead bodies as a spacesuit to move in an alien atmosphere. I got goosebumps and pinched myself hard, bringing myself back to reality. The last thing I needed was to get worked up. The bus rocked rhythmically back and forth. We were driving along the deserted streets of the city, and I was staring at the bright barred windows of the 5-story buildings. There, people were doing their own thing in comfort, warmth, and safety. They were spending time with their families, having dinner, and not thinking about death. Oh, I had to read this damn book. But then my conscience pricked me. The book was good, and was hardly to blame for its high quality. My fault, not the book. I was completely immersed in the story of the brave geologists who set off on an expedition. The romance of camp life. The description of the northern taiga. The feats of the iron spirit of the Soviet man. The bus slowed down and stopped. I again pressed myself to the viewing slit. We were standing on the platform near the gate. The city was completely surrounded by a fence, where a palisade of hewn logs with runes, where concrete blocks that did not need witchcraft. Here, at the exit from the city, the wall was 2 human heights made of white brick. Soldiers kept watch. On the watchtowers, engineers turned on the floodlights, checking if they were ready to work all night. The driver left with one of the soldiers to fill out some documents, about which he loudly argued with the servicemen, and my gaze wandered, longing to be distracted from terrible thoughts. Near the guardhouse there was a small temple, a green patch of grass and a concrete sea. Several idols frowned oak eyebrows from the greenish twilight between the trees. Thunderer Perun, Mighty Svarog, and for some reason Seamargle. The lips of the idols glistened with freshly applied blood. They were fed before each sunset. Maybe they will take pity and grant us a safe journey today. The driver returned and started the engine. The large gates creaked, and the sergeant's loud commands were heard. The bus left the city, and I grabbed my military bag with one hand and my saber with the other. The bus was shaking, and it was getting dark outside. The collective farm workers were bragging, encouraging each other with jokes, and the schoolchildren's mother was reading protective spells. The driver's voice was heard. "Don't worry, comrades, we'll soon be passing by. Glory to Perun. There's a guard battalion there, a serious force, and they're inspecting the collective farm and watching the road. It's safe here." The conductor glanced at the collective farmer who had recently asked about weapons. "Someone has my gun over there." The people sat down on the left side of the bus by the windows, ready to press their faces to the viewing slits to see the armed soldiers, the defenders of the city. Skarenko stretched out for 20 minutes, and I had never listened so attentively to the smooth murmur of the engine. "There's the gate already," the driver shouted into the cabin. The bus smoothly drove out from behind the turn, and those brave souls who were looking out into the street saw a gloomy landscape illuminated by the moon and bright stars. Several military trucks parked in a row, a high fence of a collective farm encircling the entire perimeter of the village. High, strong gates, wide open, and not a single person. No light, no movement, not a soul. The driver, realizing that there were no guards on the road or guards at the gate, stepped on the gas. The bus jerked, slowly, picking up speed. Dark silhouettes of trees flashed outside the window, but people no longer looked out. They tried not to look. Cold and anxiety spread through the space. The collective farmers fidgeted with their axes in their hands and exchanged sullen glances. "Dyusha!" An alarming call came from the cabin. The conductor got up from his seat and stuck his head into the driver's cabin. They argued about something in a low voice, and the bus began to stop. Hey, what's going on?" The passengers started shouting, "Calm down," stopping according to the order. "A wounded soldier is on the road." The conductor quickly lit the sensor. His voice sounded confident, but in the end, he still crowed. "I'll get out, take him and come back. Then we'll move on. You're risking the lives of civilians." The man in the checkered jacket was indignant. "You're obliged to ensure our safety." The conductor lit a flame. Thick smoke poured out of the metal ball on the chain. "According to the order." The man in armor thundered, "If you want to challenge the decisions of the commissariat, write a complaint." No one wanted to challenge the decisions of the commissariat. The conductor pulled the lever with difficulty. The mechanism creaked. A charge of steam shot out with force somewhere. There was a smell of moisture and machine oil. "Can you handle it alone?" the pregnant girl asked quietly. The conductor froze on the steps of the bus, a sensor in one hand, a sparking pipe of the fecal in the other. "I will help," came from somewhere inside me. The voice seemed alien, and the offer idiotic. The passengers looked at me with pity. The conductor nodded silently and went outside. I took the sword out of the sheath and followed him. My legs moved like hinged mechanisms. Reality was perceived with difficulty. According to the order, anyone with knowledge and skills in medicine is obliged to provide assistance to a wounded soldier. As an employee of the Institute, I, of course, had it. The fresh night air filled with the aromas of meadow grasses. The bus lining was warm and smelled of gasoline. The conductor, his iron uniform creaking carefully, was slowly moving toward the man lying on the side of the road. The outline of a human silhouette was as clear as a green uniform. It was definitely a soldier. I walked at a distance from the conductor and thought, why did the bus stop so far away? Why not drive right up to him? I took out my hand, pulled the man into the car, and that's it. The coward in me was short-sighted. Of course, no one was sure that this was a real person. So the conductor followed protocol. He stopped 10 steps away from the body and began waving the censer. A bass recitative of an appeal to the gods burst forth from his ironclad body and grew louder. The soldier's body moved. He raised his head. A man, about 30 years old, with terrible wounds on his cheek and on his back. "I am a man. A man," he whispered weakly, and correctly remembering that any admonitions would be futile, joined in the appeal. The conductor strode toward the wounded man and began to fumigate him, while I, going around to the other side, squatted down and examined the wounds. The situation was bad, but there was a chance. From my bag, I took out a first aid kit, a bottle of charmed water, and a grenade, laid them out next to me, and began to stitch the wounds that most urgently needed to be closed. The smoke from the censer had, in addition to its main, demon smoking, function, also an anesthetic effect, so I worked quickly and did not think about the comfort of the wounded man. He was sleeping. Meanwhile, the bus pulled up closer and the collective farmers poured out of it, nervous and wounded, with axes. At the ready, they stared at the roadside bushes. The conductor finished his prayer and began quietly instructing the collective farmers on how to carry the wounded man. I had literally a couple of stitches left to do when I heard a rustle behind me. Despite my scientific title, I didn't think long. The grenade ended up in my hand with the same swiftness with which I later parted with it, throwing it over my shoulder without even turning around. I rushed at the wounded soldier. There was a rumble from behind. The air became hot, dense, viscous. Someone grabbed me and dragged me. My legs moved on their own and my hands searched for support. Finally, they felt a handrail. I fell onto the bus seat. I was pushed in the shoulder. One of those who carried the wounded accidentally touched. Meanie rumble. The conductor was closing the heavy door. Someone was shouting. And it seemed someone was laughing. I wiped my forehead from the damp, unpleasant sweat. My palm was covered in blood. I was jolted awake already at the entrance to the village. A woman, the schoolchildren's mother, gently patted me on the shoulder. "Man, wake up, we're almost there." I opened my eyes with difficulty separating reality from what I had dreamed. I touched my head and felt a bandage on my forehead. "It's nothing serious, just a cut in the skin." I bandaged. But you'd better see a doctor, I'm not a specialist." The woman shrugged her shoulders in embarrassment. She could barely contain a smile of relief. She felt awkward smiling next to two gloomy collective farmers. "Can you tell me what happened?" "I only remember the grenade exploding." "A ghoul was sneaking up on you," the conductor muttered. "I just turned my head at the rustle, and I see a grenade already flying, and he caught it with his face. Bang! His pig face flew in all directions, but immediately two more jumped out of the bushes. I hit them with the torch, scared them a little, and the guys dragged you and the soldier into the bus. Only I didn't save Vaska." There was another louse sitting on the roof of the bus. Vaska gets on the bus, climbs onto the threshold, and the ghoul grabs him by the head and runs off into the forest. "Well, that's it. Let's go on. The order is—" I glanced at the passengers. There was one less collective farmer, so that's who this Vaska is. "My condolences," I muttered hoarsely. The collective farmers nodded sullenly in response. The bus creaked cheerfully along the illuminated streets. Machine gun towers were already visible here. A patrol was seen on the side of the road. A palisade loomed in the front observation slit. I remembered the smell of drying logs, the smell of safety. The bus stopped at the gate. The driver reported to the duty officer. The guards inspected the bus from the wheels to the roof and took away our wounded find. Behind the gate, the bus stopped and opened the doors, letting us out to enjoy the time allotted by the gods. The passengers, some with relief, some with dejectedly drooping shoulders, got out onto solid ground and wandered off in all directions. The pregnant girl was met by men, apparently her husband with his friends. An old man was waiting for the woman with school children. Those waiting were cursing at the expected ones. Why were they late? Why did they risk it? They were cursing. Lovingly, not seriously, I hurried home. I lost my bag and my saber, but I didn't regret them. I was glad to be alive, but I didn't forget my string bag with apples on the bus. I was only 2 blocks away from home. I walked down the street and shamelessly stared into the bright windows of the 5-story panel buildings. People were drinking tea, warm, reading books, laughing. Safe. I'll remember this forever. I'll never be late again. I seemed to be spitting out the accumulated nerves and fear. I was already approaching the house when I noticed an old acquaintance by the trash can, a gray cat that I fed at the bus stop. Of course, it couldn't be the same one, but it was very similar. I wanted to go up to him to take a closer look, but he crouched down and hissed predatorily. Obviously, this guy didn't want any close acquaintances. I understood all the aggressive hints and walked around him in an arc. Something banged in the trash container. Maybe the cat's accomplice was looking for food. Meanwhile, the gray one continued to hiss furiously, approaching me, as if he was defending his territory, chasing me away. Or as if, warning? In gratitude for the treat? I felt cold inside. No, it can't be. What kind of ridiculous fantasy is this? I was just overexcited. That's why. A bald, lumpy head, covered in gray, flabby skin, peeked out of the container. Faint coals flickered in the depths of empty eye sockets. The next second, I hit the back of my head on the asphalt, and the ghoul pressed me with his unexpectedly heavy and cold body. His slimy, icy palms clenched around my neck. I put out my hands in defense, and the creature began to gnaw my left one with pleasure. The cat hissed and grabbed the ghoul's face, and it did what I had so furiously dreamed of. It howled loudly in pain. The grip of my palms fell, and the ghoul began to tear away the cat, who had bitten into his enemy in earnest. "Help! Help!" I wheezed with a constricted throat, and hardly anyone could hear me even 5 steps away. But many people definitely heard the ghoul's howl. A shot rang out and the ghoul lost his hand. On the 3rd-floor balcony, an old man in his boxer shorts was reloading his Mosin rifle and desperately cursing the entire demonic tribe. Not far away, somewhere behind the nearest 5-story building, a patrol whistle rang out. The creature threw the cat away and decided that it would have time to quickly grab a bite before someone serious came for it. I crawled backwards as if that could affect anything. Again, an indistinguishable movement, a gray stroke and his teeth tearing my neck. I really wanted to lose consciousness like in the bus, to rewind the time of the traumatic experience. With every vein, I felt his vile fangs tearing off pieces of what was also in some sense me. Armed men ran out of the houses. The old man in his underwear continued to shoot, but he could not repeat the success of the first shot. The ghoul let go of me and howled again. This time the cat decided to scalp the enemy, and surprisingly, he succeeded. He slashed the monster and shreds of gray, lifeless skin flew to the sides. The ghoul spun like a top trying to throw the animal off himself. Shots rang out, and several light strokes pierced the monster's body. With a hiss, the ghoul fell on the asphalt, trembling slightly. Men ran up to the trash can from different sides. They dragged me to the entrance, and the ghoul was surrounded by a security patrol. People clad in cast-iron armor quickly and habitually dismembered the monster's body. I was brought out of my stupor by the disgusting smell of ammonia and the sweetish smoke from smoking herbs. I was sitting bandaged on a bench near my entrance. Leolia was bustling about nearby and the neighbors were busily smoking, discussing what had happened. The commissar was squatting in front of me, just throwing away the cotton wool with ammonia when I was finally able to focus my eyes on him. "How are you, Pavel Viktorovich?" "It's hard to say. Alive, that's good." I tried to smile, but it turned out that tight bandages were pulling together half of my face, neck, and collarbone. I was naked to the waist. The rags that had previously been my shirt and jacket lay like a wet, blood-soaked pancake. Near the trash can where it all happened, a heap of half-rotten flesh, bone fragments and teeth was spreading and bubbling. What had once been a ghoul. Next to the remains stood a sorcerer, a man in a robe made of thick fabric, onto which strips of tin with stamped spells were sewn. The sorcerer waved a censer and muttered his magic prayers over the remains of the evil spirit. On the balcony, the old man who had so successfully shot off the creature's limb complained about the times and called on the formidable Perun to turn his eyes to the earth. Guards in cast-iron armor slowly moved around the courtyard, searching all the dark corners. "Forgive me, Pavel Viktorovich. Any situation of this kind is my personal failure. I assure you that all the walls are currently being checked for breaches. The sewage system is being inspected by specialists. Come on, Comrade Commissar. These creatures will crawl through anywhere. It's my own fault that I was unarmed and without a whistle." The Chekist nodded vaguely, asked me a series of incoherent questions, wrote something down and left, advising me to sleep more and drink a lot of fluids. The sorcerer, a rare thing, whispered over my wounds. The pain subsided, as did the need to visit the hospital. Then it will heal on its own. They sent me home. There was no talk of dinner. I lay down on the bed and just lay there absorbing the home comfort, smells, warmth, life. Lelia, of course, cried all night, sometimes scolding me, sometimes showering me with kisses. I did not defend myself from one, and especially not from the other. I was just quietly glad that I was falling asleep, at home with my wife in bed, and not cooling off on the street, tormented by a nightmarish creature that should not exist at all. The night did not torment me with nightmares and memories of the horror I had experienced. I slept, immersed in a saving oblivion. Blessed nothingness was a healing force for my soul. I woke up when it was already dawn, and the birds began to carefully warm up with the first, not always successful trills. In the kitchen, the frying pan hissed and sizzled. The smell of scrambled eggs with sausage spread. A gray cat, my savior of yesterday, curled up in a warm lump at my shoulder, and now I suppose our pet taunt thunderstorm was gathering outside. Perun answered the old man's prayers from yesterday. Soon streams of water from the sky will wash away the blood that stained the asphalt. Soon, thunderbolts will fly from the sky, and each one will find the rotten heart of a living dead man. Each flash of lightning will mean that the world has been cleansed of another monster,